This week, Seiko returns to their classic Landmaster series and brings us a new GMT in the Prospex line. We also got something special from Baltic, a new field watch from them with a detail that might surprise you at the end, so be sure to stick around for that. This is A Week in Watches, episode 65, your weekly look back at the people, watches, and stories from the industry. My name is Blake Bettner, I'm the managing editor of Worn & Wound. I'll be your host this week. Let's jump in. All right, kicking things off with two new releases from Seiko. I love these watches. We're gonna start with a new GMT. This is a Seiko SPB411. This falls in the Prospex range. This is a new land watch. This is a recall of a watch that they made in the 60s, the Navigator Timer, which was their first GMT to utilize a rotating bezel. This watch does that utilizing the brand's 6R54 movement with a 3-day power reserve. This has a collar style GMT hand. I love how they've implemented the GMT hand here. It's a small red hand that jumps off of a gray sunburst dial that has a contrasting chapter ring in black at the perimeter. Now moving to the case, this gets a cushion case that measures 36.5 millimeters in diameter, 12.6 millimeters in thickness, and 45.2 millimeters in length. So overall, this watch should wear really beautifully, not far away from some of their other slim cushion case watches that we've seen in the Prospex range. This is a limited edition from Seiko. They will build 4,000 of these, priced at $1,500. And of course, we have much more details on this watch now live at Worn & Wound, just like all the other watches we're about to talk about today. Okay, we're gonna move on to another big release from Seiko this week. This is the SLA071. This is a watch that brings back the Landmaster nameplate into the Prospex range. This is commemorating the 30th anniversary of the Landmaster, which was first launched in 1993. 1993 was 30 years ago? Wow. I feel old. All right, this is a new to the Prospex collection. It has a distinctive three-dimensional compass bezel that really adds a lot of personality here. And of course, it's referential to some of the historic models that we've seen over the past 30 years in this collection. This uses the 8L35 movement. Moving into the dial, this watch uses a subtle gradient that goes from dark blue to slightly less dark blue. And it uses kind of a fine grained texture on the dial, which I really appreciate here. The case is titanium, which will mitigate some of the heft of the 42 millimeter diameter, 12.7 millimeter thickness, and 50.1 millimeter length of the watch in total. So overall, this should wear relatively nicely thanks to the titanium case. I love seeing this design brought back in such a way, and I hope this is the start of a new Landmaster collection from Seiko. And moving on from Seiko, as with every episode of A Week in Watches, we have a collaboration. This week it is between Montblanc and our friends at The Collective. This is the Minerva P05. Of course, Montblanc is the custodian of the Minerva brand. Montblanc, of course, acquired Minerva in 2007 and have sparingly released really beautiful examples that do justice to the Minerva nameplate in the intervening years. This P05 kind of follows in those footsteps, but takes a step away from heritage a little bit. This watch was inspired by kind of a what-if scenario. It takes its inspiration from old Minerva stopwatches with a white dial and with some colorful accents here that work really well. And instead of the red arrow in the bezel, it gets a blue arrow in the bezel. It also has a snail-style tachymeter that is put right at the center of the dial. It's very distinctive. Doesn't look old school, but it's got a lot of the details that would kind of make you feel like it's old school. Overall, this is a really beautiful watch on the dial side, and it gets even better on the back side that shows the beautiful hand-wound caliber 1321 Minerva movement. This is as finished as well as anything out there in the high-end hand-wound chronograph space. And to cap it all off, it's a monopusher as well. Now this watch is priced at $34,500. There will be 30 of them made. And when you turn it over and compare it to other watches in the high-end hand-wound chronograph space, I think you'll see why it's priced like that. One other unusual detail about this watch is that it uses the Aero Minerva logo on the dial, which is not something that we see often from Montblanc when they're making these watches. If you're interested in learning more about this watch, check out our podcast from the other week with Asher Rapkin of The Collective. We talked in detail about this watch and about the process of making it and designing it. Overall, this one turned out really beautifully. And overall, I think Montblanc has done an excellent job of preserving the Minerva namesake with watches like this. Before moving on, we want to say thank you once again to Shinola for sponsoring this week's episode. Let's take one more look at that beautifully produced film that they've put together for us, highlighting their facilities in the great city of Detroit.
How do you make an icon? Simple answer is, you don't. You just make something for the right reasons. Asking yourself, would you use it? Will it last? Is there any way to make it better? You steer clear of fads and trends and the latest. Building what you love in the way you believe in. And if you do all that, the things you make will find their place. So what do you call that? We call it Shinola.
Thanks again to Shinola. I really love the facilities there in Detroit. I've been there personally, and I can tell you they've got a beautiful campus there in a great part of the city, undergoing a big-time rejuvenation thanks in part to what they're doing. All right, moving on, we have an exciting new watch from Nomos. That's right. Do you remember when the original Club came out? If you were around back then, this was around 2007. This was the Club 701. It's had a creamy off-white dial with kind of a dark orange or red hands. Very distinctive, and it was really a hallmark of what you could get for the money at the time. This was around $1,000. It used their in-house movements. This was a really exciting watch when it came out. It's a watch that we likely all have some association with in some form or another. This is a watch in a colorway that they discontinued in 2017. They're bringing it back this week with the 701.1. This is the same colorway that they launched the Club with in 2007. It has received some subtle design revisions here, but this is still through and through the recognizable 701 from 2007. This measures 36 millimeters in diameter, 8.2 millimeters in thickness, and 47.5 millimeters from lug to lug. There's loads of nostalgia here, and it's still priced reasonably well at $1,500. I love seeing this watch make a return here from Nomos, and it's kind of a nice nod to their past and what a lot of their longtime fans associate with the brand. Next, we have a new watch from Ming. This is the 3707 Monolith. This is a follow-up to the Mosaic that we saw released last year of the same reference number. This uses a brushed, blasted, and DLC-coated case that measures 38 millimeters in diameter and 10.9 millimeters in thickness. The Mosaic pattern here is made more subtle thanks to the use of a dark gray superluminova on the dial. So there's a real subtlety to the Mosaic pattern here on the dial. On the inside, they're using a Sellita SPB411 that gets their own kind of unique configuration and look to it. Really beautiful, elevated in a really beautiful way. And great news for fans of the brand, this watch is shipping next month. So if you're able to get your hands on one of the 250 examples of this watch being made, you should have your watch by the holiday season. This watch is priced at 3,500 Swiss francs. It's definitely one of my favorite iterations of the Monolith to date. And finally, we have a new watch from Baltic. This is a new field watch called the Hermetique. I'm not very fancy, so I'm going to say Hermetic. This is a new field watch design that kind of pulls in classic Baltic style. As we've seen Baltic do time and again, they are really great at capturing a vibe and a feel of watches from the past and reinterpreting them in a modern way. They've done this with the whole kind of field watch style with this watch. They are launching it in 4 different dial colors: blue, green, beige, and brown. Really love the syringe hands and the applied Arabic numerals at 12, 3, 6, and 9 that are covered in lume. There's also a contrasting chapter ring done in black at the edge of the dial that I think is really sharp here. And one interesting detail about this watch that sets it apart that might be a little difficult to put your finger on right off the bat is the recessed crown. It's not actually recessed, it's really just sitting flush with the case wall. So its diameter is truly from edge to edge. The crown is pulled out from the case, wound and set, and then pushed back in, sitting again flush with that case wall. It's a really interesting detail here that kind of pushes this watch over the top, especially at this price point, which is 550 euros. Inside there is a Miyota 9039 with 42 hours of power reserve. The case measures 37 millimeters in diameter and just 10.8 millimeters in thickness. Overall, this is a really beautiful watch from Baltic, offered at a great price with a lot of thoughtful details mixed in there. Hopefully this will be kind of a start of a new collection and range from Baltic. I know they're really good at reinterpreting some of these classic design genres into new and refreshing models. That is episode 65 of A Week in Watches. And before we go, a quick shout out to 24-Hour GMT, channel 64, for our favorite comment on the last episode, who notices the pointed crown guard of Tudor, which was an initial detail to make the crown a little bit easier to access. We agree, and we love that detail about Tudor. If you have any comments on this week's watches, be sure to leave them down below. We'll give a shout out to our favorite in the next episode. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. And if you enjoyed this content, please be sure to leave a like and share. It helps us out a lot. Until next time, take care.